Hello, and welcome to Unco, a podcast about what's unusual in tech. I'm your host, Timothy Buck. It's the night after the keynote, and Ryan Jones joined me to discuss the keynote, what Apple announced, and what that says about their strategy. If you want to help me keep the show around, become a patron over at patreon.com/uncofm. Hey Ryan, how's it going?
Hey, how are you?
Doing well. So what did you think of the announcements today? Just high level, good, bad, ugly?
High level, yeah. So I wavered back and forth. I think I end up right in the mediocre, some things good, some things bad camp.
I know what you mean. Before we dive in too deep, can you just introduce yourself and tell my listeners a little bit about who you are?
Sure. My name is Ryan Jones. I started kind of in the Apple community because I made an app called Weather Line, which got a lot more attention than I ever expected. Then I actually worked for Apple in operations, so it wasn't anything related to iOS or software development. And I left Apple about 3 years ago and went to I would call it a consulting firm, and I was the director of technology there. And I recently just left that to pursue apps full time. So I'll be doing Weatherline 2 full time, along with a new app called Flighty, which is personal flight tracking. So I'll be splitting my time between those two. And I should probably say that I'm not the developer side of it. I'm the business strategy, marketing, product side of those apps.
Yeah, that's cool. I didn't realize you were moving full time for that. That's a big deal, man. Congratulations.
Yeah, that was like a week and a half ago. So
okay.
We'll see.
Yeah, and I guess I've been following you on Twitter for a while now, so that's kind of how I figured out who you were. And I think the focus for today is going to be just talking about what they announced at WWDC and what that means for Apple's strategy. And you're kind of more in a product role, and I actually work as a product manager. So we have similarities there in that we're not necessarily the people doing the development, but work really closely with developers on a daily basis, and also working a lot on like the strategy of software. So I think that our perspective there could be interesting.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. In my intro, the part that's most applicable and probably the reason that you know about me and a lot of people on Twitter is just Apple commentary over the years. Like you said, I really look at all the small things that they do and have kind of built a reputation as someone who just talks about their strategy a lot. So I think that's how most people know me.
Yep. Yeah, I think so. Well, I guess we can kind of jump right in. So they structured it. They structured the announcements with. Well, the first thing that stood out to me is at the very beginning. I think it was Tim said that this was going to be all about software.
Yeah.
And that was just like, oh, I guess that means the rumors are true. There's not going to be any hardware or anything going on. What do you think about that? What do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, as usual, Apple does an incredible job of level setting right off the bat in a really positive way. He could have said that a multitude of different ways, but the way he said it, it's kind of led the audience to understand exactly what was going to happen and what wasn't going to happen. I get the impression that this is kind of skipping ahead a little bit, but you got to dive in at some point. I get the impression that there's a lot of slowing down going on. I get the impression that there may have been some Mac stuff that could have been done, could have been released, could have been announced, or in typical Apple style of late pre-announced. But I think that they're hearing a lot of the feedback and slowing down and releasing things when they're ready and talking about products when they're more ready. Um, Obviously, that flies in the face of the marzipan stuff that came at the end, but we can talk about that. But yeah, I think they did a nice job of saying this is software, and then they laid out the 4 platforms, iOS first, and I really got the sense today that they were hammering home, we are not going to combine these platforms. These are 4 distinct things, and they all sync in the background.
Yeah. Yeah, and this is, I guess, the second year in a row that they've had a similar structure where they're just like specifically call out the different OSs. And yeah, I think you're right. The only thing that I wish they would have said is like shown Siri as an equal to these 4, but
Mm-hmm.
that just is across all of them. Because I had Carolina Milanese on the show the last episode, and that was one of the things that we talked about a lot, that we wanted to see is Apple showing that they don't see Siri as a feature for each of their platforms, but instead like a cross-functional platform of its own that just happens to work on each of the software OSs. But we definitely didn't see that. There was some stuff we can talk about later about Siri, but that isn't what we saw today.
Yeah, not at all. And another thing that was completely missing was HomePod. I don't even think they mentioned it at all.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Yeah, I didn't realize that until just now, but I don't think they did at all. Even with Apple TV, that was one of the things that I was hoping, is that they would integrate it better with Apple TV in some way, but I didn't. Oh, wow. Yeah, that's no good.
Yeah, it's. I mean, you would hope that up on that slide of all the 4 platforms, at least they would mention that there's HomePod, OS, or whatever they want to call it. I think it just kind of goes further to show that at the moment, it's just an extension of your iPhone. It's just a speaker that attaches to your iPhone.
Yeah. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how that changes in the fall, because it also seemed like we're kind of all over the place, but that's kind of how this is going to end up being. It seemed like they were setting up a lot of stuff for the fall,
Mm-hmm.
like the iPad software stuff that I noticed. Like a lot of people were talking on Twitter that the design changes for iPad is like basically pulling in a lot of the same swipe functionality from the iPhone like 10. And they moved the header to where it had like the clock on the left and everything else on the right. So I'm expecting now, because of that there'll be hardware that is has Face ID and stuff like that on the iPad this fall. And they always do that. They do things that kind of foreshadow what's going to come in the big hardware releases, but it seemed almost more so this time.
Yeah, I think they've set themselves up for an absolute behemoth of a product release in the fall. Like if you think through the hardware side of things, there's almost nothing that's due for a refresh. I mean, maybe the iMac Pro, but literally other than that, like all the laptops are due. Obviously the phones, obviously the watch will happen. It's probably about time for AirPods 2. HomePod is probably not going to happen, but there's been a little bit of rumors of a lower priced. And then the one you just said is iPad. So I think if I had to guess, I'd say the whole product line is getting really close to being turned over.
Yeah, and just a few months ago, just like thinking about what would happen this summer, I was thinking that at WWDC it would be like laptops and tablets, and then in the fall it would be kind of everything else. But like you said, like they said at the announcement, this was all about software, so we didn't see any hardware at all, and that means the fall is going to be crazy, or hopefully the fall is really packed. And if so, that'll be good for them. They're all kind of really important releases. They're not just like the iPads definitely need updated. The watch, I would love to see a more extensive redesign of it instead of just like they've done a lot of really cool stuff with the watch and it's gotten a lot better. But I think this is really an opportunity to have a full redesign of at least its thickness, um, and the Macs. Everybody wants new MacBook Pros. Um, the phones are obviously going to happen. Those happen every year. So yeah, like you said, and then there's all those extra stuff that could maybe happen with the HomePod and AirPods and anything additional they may add. So this fall is going to be huge.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's exactly right. I think we know now that it basically has to be a two-event fall. So, right, it has to be the classic iPhone in September, and then if they put the iPad and the watch with that, and then the Mac is in October, or whether or not the iPad stays behind and goes with the Mac in October. But either way, it's going to have to be two events because there's just too much to put into one event.
Yeah, yeah. No, I agree. So back to this event.
Mm-hmm.
Let's start. Let's just go in the order of how things went. So it started with iOS, right?
Yep.
And just trying to think. I was talking to my wife at dinner, trying to like just give her the rundown on what happened, and um, it seemed like there were a lot of little things. Like I think the Siri shortcuts were an interesting idea. It seems like that's probably just. It looked like they took a lot of the work that the guys who built Workflow did, and just integrated it in with Siri. That has a lot of potential, depending on how. And I didn't see any of the technical details, but like um, how much flexibility developers have to actually implement it.
Mm-hmm.
But that of all the things mentioned for iOS was the most interesting to me. What did you think about those?
Yeah, so I think that's exactly right. I'm here with the Flighty team, and we had the same kind of impression. We'd looked at each other afterwards, and we were like, what is there here that we need to be ready and we need to be working on? And to be honest, from a developer point of view, that's kind of the only thing. We were joking, but the only other thing would be performance. I mean, they started the whole thing off immediately saying that they're doubling down on performance and really put a lot of focus into older devices. So I think we saw, immediately right off the bat, their reaction to the kind of folklore, I guess it is a little bit, but it's also true at this point of the slowing down of the performance of the older devices. So beyond performance, I think that Siri's really the only really showcase thing for developers that they need to work on. A lot of the other stuff. So you look at like notifications and the digital health and the Memoji and all that kind of stuff, and that's internal. Like that's Apple. There's really nothing developer facing. So
Yeah,
I think that's exactly right. I think Siri is the interesting part that kind of has the unlimited potential to see what the developers um, do with it. I was actually really interested as soon as I saw how similar it was to Workflow. The thing that crossed my mind immediately is how are they gonna make this more approachable? Workflow is a really pro app. I'd even tried times before and gotten overwhelmed with some of the crazy things that you can do with it. And to be honest, I didn't see what I would have liked to or what I would have expected from them. If I imagine the 1 billion iOS devices that are out there right now and a range of skills that you have of people that are using them, this is going to be interesting to see how many of them can effectively use these Siri shortcuts and string together these crazy recipes that they've showcased.
yeah, and I've already installed the beta, and um, I always do this, and usually it's not a good idea, but this is really, really stable. Like,
Yeah, I
it,
said the same thing on Twitter. I mean,
it's
I don't.
weird. It's almost like more stable than 11.4 or whatever.
I agree 100%. People were giving me a hard time for putting it on my device, and I always do it too. I mean, it's my job to see the design and the strategy implications. I was joking, and I don't even want to say it out loud because it's dangerous for Apple if the narrative catches on. But this really feels like an 11.5. It just does.
Yeah. No, yeah. I mean, there is a good bit of stuff that we're not seeing yet. Like, I don't see what we were just talking about, the Siri stuff. Like there's a little
Hmm.
bit in Siri settings, but there isn't. What did they call it? Shortcuts. Wasn't there like a
Shortcuts.
shortcuts app that was supposed to be here too? That worked a lot like workflow. Like it was supposed to be a standalone app, right?
Yep, yep. That's
Yeah,
not there yet.
yeah,
The piece that's in there is very basic in terms of like you can tell it when I say the word show current location, you open the map and you show me the current location, which is kind of funny, but
yeah.
that I have to tell it that that's a shortcut, but it's in there.
Yeah, I almost feel like this may be a way of like back to Siri shortcuts. It may be a way of kind of helping train uh, Siri, and
Oh, that's interesting.
like maybe it's not meant for all 1 billion users to use, but like if enough people do use it, then they can enter in like what they're like basically just build out what they're expecting, and it seems um, like developers, just based on like the little bit that I've read and the stuff I've seen on Twitter, that developers are going to be able to tie into this in really interesting ways, and it could expand Siri. Like this could be step one. Step one is get Siri integrated with all of these different types of apps through this, and then step two is uh, like Siri just like learns how to do that without you having to set it up. But maybe that's a little bit too optimistic.
I love that. I think that's a great read on what's happening here. One of the things that I'm surprised it never really got as much attention. But I got really curious maybe a year ago about, I was just like, why is Amazon so good at voice? How, we're talking about an online shopping experience and cloud compute. Like, how all of a sudden is Alexa so good? And I just went kind of, spelunking in the corners of the internet. And I found out immediately that what they had done is used Mechanical Turk, and they basically put out their own job requests or whatever they're called, and asked people to record themselves saying these phrases over and over and over. And it was like this known thing in the Mechanical Turk community that they just built this incredible database of people saying these key phrases. So I think it's really interesting that, the one I was just poking fun at a little bit of show current location, um, all of a sudden you have a ton of recordings that you can analyze. And man, I don't know how they do that with their really intense privacy stance. Maybe there's a way you can just make it anonymous, or measure the waveform or something like that.
Yeah, I
I'm
don't
not
know if
sure.
anything changed with that because I believe I don't think it, I don't think that they actually send the audio back to Apple
Yeah, I don't either.
like
So I don't
today.
know
Yeah,
how they can apply the voice side of it, but it sure seems like a missed opportunity. Um, I definitely like your strategic. I definitely like your strategic insight that this can be used to help better map what phrases go to what.
yeah, and to step back a second, like Siri isn't that bad at understanding you. What it's
No, it's
bad
great.
at
Yeah.
is like taking that and then doing something useful with it. So even if that we're not sending the audio to Apple servers, like if Siri on device is translating it to text and then like in some encrypted way sending the what is being like that text to Apple, then even just having that could be a really helpful training tool, like for the part that Siri's bad at, which is um, actually doing what we intend it to do. And because with this shortcuts thing, we're like proactively telling it this is what we want it to do with these specific words, then maybe I don't know, maybe that would work.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. That is interesting. Um, yeah, I'm really interested to see, if we think long-term strategy, how this privacy stance continues to have implications on how well they can do this kind of stuff. And like the photo search, I don't know if you caught it today, but they talked about photo search and how they've expanded that and it's better than ever. And then they kind of slipped in there that it's still on-device machine learning. So it still does that crazy thing where it does the processing on each individual device when you first get your photo library on them.
Yeah, and I can't tell whether this is just like a really like I mean I have friends from Twitter and elsewhere who just think this is the dumbest thing ever that they're doing and it's just a big strategic blunder. But
Mm-hmm.
and I completely see that. And then part of me thinks like at some point is this going to be like a really really valuable differentiator for Apple? Like they're trying to play it that way, right? That's what they're trying to do in like their PR. But if they can actually be successful with on-device stuff and with really catching up, then it may end up being a positive. But it really comes down to like, is is putting these handcuffs on themselves going to make them like fall behind so far that they end up really losing out, or are they going to be able to succeed with the handcuffs on and then be shown as like better than their competition because of that?
Yeah, it's one of the things that we're going to look back on, and uh, it's to be seen how history will write this decision. I think it is interesting. The thing that I always have been advocating for is that the way that they have it set up right now, they don't even see, the voice recordings that we're making, and they don't tie individual searches and individual photo searches and faces and stuff like that to the person. They use the differential privacy. The thing that I've been an advocate for is in certain things that are less privacy invasive, I would at least be willing to grant access to Apple alone to come into like a trusted circle. So, to me, they have earned the credibility of I would allow them to hear voice recordings or see typed locations on a map. And I trust them enough to just keep that between me and Apple. So like they're in my trusted circle, but nobody else is. And I think that obviously you would make some different tiers of privacy related stuff, and they would err on the side of being super cautious about it. But to me, that's always been an interesting strategic path that they've never taken. They've always been down the road of, we don't even want to know. And like you said, it's impossible to know in a theoretical world where Siri's, I would say, even half as good as the competitors. The privacy angle of it would be way more important. But at the moment, it's really hard to tell if that's what's hampering it, or if some of the management decisions that was covered in that information expose a few months ago. And then, you also had the Siri founders coming out and saying that this is never what it was meant to do. It was meant to be way more specific, and this is way too general. So it's really, really hard to tell, like you said, about privacy, if that's what's holding it back and how much it is holding it back.
Yeah, I think that's something that we could talk about for a long time, and a lot of
Mm-hmm.
people have. And you're right. Like it right now, it seems like it's probably going to end up being a negative for them. But um, part of me thinks like there's still a possibility um, if they play their cards right. And it may even be as simple as like uh, if you build this reputation, it's just like we're different from the competition, right? And then you make that request and say, "Hey, we're the people who keep your data safe, and we're the people who aren't selling ads based on your information, and we're not, the whole PR pitch they've been giving for 3 years, right? So they do that a little bit more, and then they make that like request of us to give them more data. Maybe they will have like I don't know. This gets to me to the point where I'm just like trying to explain what may possibly be good about these decisions.
Yeah.
But um, so we can move on in a second. But yeah, the rest of my thought there was like it could be a move where they're saying, hey, let's build this trust, and then we'll like use that trust, like you were saying, where you trust them, so you're willing to give them your data in a way that you're not willing to give to other people. And because some of their direct competitors um, uh, have just always taken the data and used it for ads and other things like that, they may be losing some trust. But I don't even know if that is true. I don't know if the average user doesn't trust Google or Amazon, because I think based on some of the stuff I saw from Tech Pinions and Ben Beharin over there, that people tend to actually trust those companies pretty well.
Yeah, I don't think that makes it into the mainstream as much as Apple enthusiasts like us would hope.
Yeah.
I think it's not as valued as we and Apple think it is.
Yeah. Well, I'll kind of run through some of the other stuff from iOS and see if there's anything that you thought stood out. So we already talked about performance. We talked about Siri. There's group FaceTime with up to 32 people. That was supposed to be here years and years and years ago. Are you still there?
Yeah, I'm back now.
Okay. Uh, I'm just kind of listing some things off, but like group FaceTime was supposed to be here years and years and years ago, but uh, it's finally here. Hopefully, it works well. Maybe it'll work better than Skype, and we won't have all the Skype issues that we have. That'd be cool.
Saving podcasters around the world.
Yeah. um, yeah, we talked about photos already. I thought it was interesting that they gave so much like time to like news adding a sidebar. Uh, the Stocks app being like integrated with news, which I guess was kind of cool, but I I don't know if that really needed stage time.
Well, you didn't want to learn about voice memos?
Oh, right, voice memos. Yeah. I was hoping that voice memos was going to be, hey, we built voice memos, and it's now a way not only to do memos but also to like make podcasts. So that would be cool, but that didn't happen. So I think the last one that
Yeah, I saw you tweet that, and I was like, "Oh man, it's
yeah.
not going to happen, Tim." So
Yeah.
my takeaway from all the my takeaway from the books and the news and the stocks, and I actually put CarPlay in this category, and the notes I was taking was, to me, I put that under this category of like content platforms. So, we've seen them getting into obviously music and now TV shows, and then there's all these um, stories about the TV shows that they're syndicating themselves and they're bankrolling themselves. Um, so I think books is just another content platform that they, see the advantages of having users be one in all their ecosystem. And then I think news and stocks are the exact same thing. I think it's just content. They understand the strategic value of content. If you can create, as crazy as it sounds, like if you have a really good news experience on iOS, there are people who will stay on iOS for that experience. If you can make, stocks experience that's borderline, not even close, but like maybe in a crazy world semi close to a Bloomberg experience, there are people that will stay on iOS just for that. So to me, I just saw that as kind of shoring up the content walls.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. And the stocks one in particular, the fact that it like pulled in Apple News, I thought that was a good move. Um, and it'll be interesting to see if Apple begins to like embed Apple News type content elsewhere, because it has video in it. Like the Apple News platform, at least based on like what I've read about it and the people I know who know a lot more about how it's technically created, seems to be like a really really well built uh, system, and that it like I know it they can do like live video, they can do like live updating, like chat type thing where like if somebody was watching WWDC, they could like in their company CMS, they could just keep adding detail and it'll show up live. And they do a lot of really interesting
Oh wow.
things in like in the app. And I don't actually use the app, but um, uh, I get pretty much everything from Twitter. But one of my do you know Eric on Twitter? Um,
Which Eric? Which last? What's his?
oh, I don't actually know his last name. You if you knew Eric, who I was,
Oh, is it Eric, analytics guy?
yeah.
Yeah, yeah, I do know
So
him.
he always talks about Apple News, right? And uh, his he he and I have met a couple times in person, and he's told me a ton of stuff about how Apple News works, and um, it seems like they built it in a way like every time like, he works for NBC, and every time one of the NBC like affiliates or whatever does a new thing, he'll like message me all about it and tell me about it. And so they've done like live TV shows on it. They've done like live events where they show the video and have messages under it. All this interesting stuff that, and there's actually like a decent number of people using the app. So
Hmm.
I think it's interesting that they're embedding it into something like stocks, and it seems like they're doing some cool stuff there. But it's not like it's not affecting me on a daily basis. I just think it could be like you're talking about this like play to if you have really good content and if you have a way of like pulling content from all these really good places and having it in one place, that can be really really valuable. It'll be interesting to see what Apple does with that and see if they actually expand it past the I don't know like half dozen countries that it's in right now.
Yeah, I mean, I think you see all of the big players in tech. I guess they call them the FANG stocks, but you see all the um, everyone trying to build up these content gardens effectively because in a world where every platform has Facebook and every platform has Amazon and every platform has Twitter, if you can create a differentiator that the other guys don't have, it is valuable and it can keep people on your platform. And I rolled my eyes when they put the stocks icon up on those initial 14 icons that they were going to talk through. And then when he talked about it and he said that they're going to pull news in there, I was like, okay, that makes sense. Like that is a to a certain segment that is extremely important information. And if you can build a great experience around that, it's a differentiator.
Yeah, and I have it on my phone right now, and I mean it's nice. Like I'm not going to be the type of person who's in there all day, but like it seems nice. Like you select a stock and it shows all the like recent articles from that about that specific company, and it has all the other features that it had before. But like it's pretty cool. Like to choose. to choose Apple, and then you see like Business Insider, TechCrunch, CNN, all that stuff, and you open it up, and it's like a native, nice iOS reading experience, not just like opening up in some web view. Like that's pretty cool.
Yeah, I'm looking at it too. It is interesting. There's a couple things I noticed right off the bat. It's really weird that they have the Stocks app icon in the Stocks app in the top right corner, and it's strange. It's strange to me for all the features that they built out that there's not any sort of portfolio mechanism to say, these are the stocks that I own and here's how much.
Yeah,
But I think it's a nice strategic move, and it's one of those things where you have all the pieces. You just need to put it together in this way, and I think it's also a little bit of taking an opportunity that they see. It doesn't sound like you're too into the stocks world, but maybe this has hit your world. Google Finance has just been an absolute train wreck lately. Like they did a redesign, and everyone's upset about it. So I think it's also a little bit of opportunity taking.
yeah. I did see that a lot of people were going back to like Yahoo Finance, which was a big deal forever ago, and then Google Finance kind of took over. So that's interesting. Last thing that I wanted to pull out for iOS was the Animoji, the custom Animoji. The what do they call them? Memoji. Um, I made one for myself. It was kind of fun. I don't think I'll really use it that often, but I think it's interesting technology, and I do like that that they have more stuff in the iMessage camera. That was cool. Um, like it has like pulling in stickers, pulling in an emoji that like go over your head, like little things. But I think they do something to make iMessage more than just an SMS platform, right? It's more than that, and these features that I might not use every day, they help to add value for the ecosystem.
Yeah, absolutely. I would call it like a beginner Snapchat. It's got enough stuff in there to kind of get the feel for it and make it personalized. I think, one of the things that I noticed, I made my little Memoji also. I immediately wanted to take a picture of myself and just have it make the Memoji for me.
Right. Yeah.
And this kind of, I was struggling with articulating this kind of all through the presentation today, and it kind of hit me later on. But they're doing a lot of stuff that I started referring to as manually smart. So they're like on the cusp of doing all this powerful AI and anticipating my needs and the Siri really going to the next level. But they've left this one degree of manualness like that they can't quite get there. So, like the Siri shortcuts, we have to program these recipes. And then the do not disturb, they give the example of the movie theater about how if you're going into a movie theater, you can say to turn on do not disturb until I leave this location. Well, why can't it? Why doesn't it know that I'm going into a movie theater and either suggest it or do it for me automatically? And then the Memoji, like, why am I going in here trying to manually pick all these different pieces out? Why isn't it doing it for me? I just feel like maybe it's training data, or maybe it's just the fact that this isn't their core competency. And, Google is so much better at these type of things, but it feels like they're on the edge of trying to do these smart things, and we're just having to provide a little bit of the oomph.
Yeah. No, yeah, I agree. It's interesting. Same thing with like the watch, the workouts and stuff on the watch, where it detects that you're having a workout, but it doesn't just automatically initialize it. It like suggests that you start the workout, and the same thing for ending the workout. If you just like your heart rate drops, to a normal level, it'll suggest that it might be finished. It doesn't just like end the workout. Um, and I can see why you wouldn't want to do that if it wasn't really good.
Right. That's exactly what I was thinking too. Is they're just they want to do it. They're scared.
Yeah, and you do have to build like I guess it makes sense to build like the manual stuff. Like for building a memoji, you need you probably should have a manual way of doing it so that you can do like I don't know, I saw Renee Ritchie did like a green version of himself because you can do a whole bunch of them. So that's kind of fun. Like you might want to do ones that don't actually look exactly like you, but but it should be able to do like you were saying. It would be really cool if you could just take a picture of myself and it made something that looked like me.
Yeah, yeah. I really, I've been a big Apple fan, strategically, design wise, everything for a long time. And the thing that's been weighing on me recently is that the smartphones, okay, so we've reached 0% smartphone growth. Like, and I don't know if you've read a bunch of the reports lately, but there's there's no more unit growth. Basically, we're people are just fighting for the same amount, the same size pie. And if I think about what's the next strategic forefront that these different platforms are going to be battling on, and to me, it comes down to doing things for me, making my life easier, anticipating my needs, and having things ready and waiting for me. So it's really great to see Apple moving into this smart, proactive kind of AI direction. I have my usual concerns that this isn't something that they've historically been amazing at. But there's not a whole lot more that I can ask for besides start going in that direction. So it's great to see.
Yeah, I agree. So let's maybe we're 40 minutes in and we're done with iOS, but let's just quickly on watchOS. Was there anything there that stuck out to you at all?
So what stuck out to me about watchOS is kind of a part of a bigger story. What stuck out to me there is this thing is a notification machine. Like that, of course, there's fitness and there's some nice touches for human connectedness, but they didn't even talk about apps. They didn't even really talk about complications. So I think that they've realized that, earlier we talked about HomePod being a audio extension of the iPhone. I think to me at this point, Watch is a notification extension of the iPhone.
Hmm. Yeah, I think I don't think you're wrong, but I think it's interesting that they're as as it seems like they're realizing that that's true. They're also like empowering the watch in a whole lot of ways. Well, not a whole lot of ways, but like the podcast app, that's a thing that people will have been wanting to do. Opening up the APIs there to allow other like music streaming, music or audio apps. That seemed like a kind of a big deal. But for me, like when I think of the watch, I think of it for really like there's the clear stuff, like it's for workouts and it's for notifications. Those are the two like killer features that everybody realized after watchOS, after the first watch. Like those
Mm-hmm.
are really the only things that were useful about the first watch, and that's actually what I still have. Is the first one, and that doesn't get updates anymore, so
Yeah, I saw
I might
that.
be getting a new one. But yeah, so those two things were really clear. But it seems like as the watches have gotten faster, people want to like have audio content on them with the AirPods. So it does make sense to kind of expand it past just being, uh, you know, basically workouts and notifications and like glancing at a few things that may be on a complication to actually consuming content off of it. And then the last one that I really think has a lot of potential is this concept of it being like an identifier for you. Um, I know
Mm-hmm.
like they've had it for logging you into your Mac for a while, which is just okay. It's not really like super fast, but they announced like having it work with student ID cards and being able to just like get into buildings that you need to get into at like Duke and a handful of other universities. I think that's really cool, and it's something that I want to see for my life. Like I want to get into my car and my house and all of those things through my watch. I think that'd be super cool. But and there was the information had a scoop that something like this was coming, but they seemed to think it was uh, a lot broader than this. Um, but I think that is a really big potential area for the watch. Is being like since it's always on you, you don't have to like look at it or anything. If it's still on you, then you're you, and it automatically identifies you as you. And I think that's really powerful.
Yeah, I think it's a great point. I hadn't really noted, I hadn't really thought about this before, but we had all these rumors of NFC being opened up into an API, and we didn't see that today, which is unfortunate because it has a lot of those same capabilities of unlocking stuff that you're talking about. Um, yeah, I think it's totally fair pushback that the audio stuff is definitely a big deal. I kind of see that as an extension of fitness, but personally, the podcast, the lack of podcast ability has held me from being a big watch user. Um, and then I think your call out about the identity is really really smart. If I think about the stuff that's in my pocket at this point, the only thing that can't be replaced by my iPhone is my driver's license. Credit cards. I have Apple Pay, keys. I have HomeKit. Uh, Pretty much all the main stuff can be replaced. And so if you start going into this ID space, and I think college is a great place to start, um, that starts to get interesting to me because you need someone big in that space to come in and say, "Hey, we've integrated with whatever the 20 biggest states in the United States, and we're going to be able to digitize your license to kind of get that ball rolling."
Yeah, I think that would be awesome. Like license car keys would be the big one because like I can get a lock for my house, no problem, right? And I would, but I don't right now because it's not worth spending the like $100 or however much it costs, $150 because I'm still going to have to carry keys to get into my car, you know?
Yep.
Um, but if at some point my watch or my phone is what's letting me into my car and to my house, then then that then it just once it's everything, then it provides more value. Like as a whole, it's more valuable than each piece.
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool. Well, I think that's WatchOS. Um, tvOS. I don't really know. I don't even remember what they said other than cool new backgrounds from space. Uh, do you remember anything?
I remember it being a gigantic sales pitch trying to get me to buy an Apple TV.
Oh, right. Yeah. So there were some interesting things, but this was another one of those things where it's like they're integrating with these big companies, like some company in France, Canal Plus. I,
Yeah,
I don't
someone in Switzerland.
Salt, I think was the name of it, and then Charter Spectrum here, where they have some like no sign on thing where if you're just like on your network, then you're automatically signed into everything, and that's really cool. But it's going to take a while to roll out to enough places to be valuable to more than the handful of people who have an Apple TV and are on Charter Spectrum.
Yeah, that zero sign on thing is, that's the kind of stuff that I love Apple for. That it's such a clever, well done, really nicely thought out feature. Obviously, I'm kind of at the risk of putting my foot in my mouth to see if it actually works, but I just love the clever solutions like that. You know, to me, they're kind of working on the wrong axis or some phrase like that. the the Apple TV is too expensive. I mean, that's all there is to it. The competitors in this space are 50, 60, $70, and yes, they have streaming problems, but they need to be down at the $99 price point. Until then, it's kind of unfortunate, but I don't really think a lot of this software tweaking is really that interesting until they can get to a point where it's easier for people to have. People need 3, 4, 5 of these things in their house. At $150, or 180, 190, it's just crazy.
Yeah, no, I agree. I, it's interesting because they seem to be positioning it as like one of their four OSs, but at the same time, it seems like it's more of just like an accessory that they create for their hardcore Apple fans. You know?
Yeah, I agree absolutely. And the other huge elephant in the room here is that every TV is a smart connected TV now, and all the main apps are already built into someone's TV for free. They have Netflix, they have Amazon Prime, a lot of them have Showtime, a lot of them have YouTube and YouTube TV. Like this is uphill sledding to me, and I definitely want them to succeed, and I want to see it. I just have a little bit less hope for this becoming something huge that can replace cable for me, kind of as the days go on.
Yeah, I mean, I use one, and I haven't had cable for years, and it is nice. Like I've tried a lot of the competitors and stuff, and they're just not quite as nice. Like my TV is a smart TV too, but it's terrible, right? If you use their interface, but it's a couple years old. Like so, maybe the newer ones they've improved those interfaces, and for the average person, they're not going to care that much whether the Netflix app is really smooth or not.
Yeah.
Um, for me, it's like, okay, I'm interested in it, and like $150 or whatever, it's not that big of a deal. So, well, it's worth trying out, but it's hard for me to recommend to other people.
Oh, it's impossible. Yeah, you can't do it. I mean, MG Siegler nailed this about a month ago when they killed the Airport Extremes and the Airport Expresses. It's just a missed opportunity in terms of turning the Apple TV into a TV and an Eero style mesh network, and maybe it's also a microphone that can relay to HomePods, and then it can also output audio into whatever speaker it's plugged into. It, and to talk about the smart TV stuff, I got a new LG TV, and I don't think I've flipped over to my Apple TV once. The remote is that one where you kind of point it at the screen like a wand, and it has it looks like a teardrop that moves around, and it absolutely annihilates the Apple TV remote, which is not hard to do. But it's an interesting place to watch. This is from our angle of a strategic point of view. This is a really, really hard space because anytime you deal with, broadcast or anything related to TV and bundling and these duopolies that exist in the U.S., it's just a strategic landmine one after the next.
We're starting to run out of time here, but we'll move into macOS, and there was actually a good bit here. I'll kind of just like run through it. Some of the features. They're calling it Mojave or Mojave. Um, the one of the first like most visible things is dark mode, system dark mode. They've had a setting called dark mode for a long time, but it basically just did a handful of things, and now this will actually be like a dark version of Finder and a lot of the Apple apps, photos and all, and mail and all that kind of stuff. I think that's cool. That's something that I will use for sure. Um, there's a new Mac App Store that actually looks really good, and they've apparently brought back a bunch of the they brought back some of the software makers who left for some reason. We don't really know why they've come back, but hopefully they've made changes to you know to some of the stringent stuff that they had going on, that that led to these software makers leaving. Um, they did some stuff around privacy. It seemed like Safari is really going to like crack down on Facebook, and companies like that that are doing a lot of tracking. I thought that was really interesting. And this is maybe like the second or third time, third year in a row that they've made changes around Safari and privacy on iOS and Mac that like directly hit these companies who do a lot of tracking and do a lot of like make their money based on putting together these data sets about you. I thought that was really interesting. What do you think about that one in particular?
Yeah, I actually have a little bit of an exposure to the ad side of this. The product consulting company that I left recently has a pretty strong marketing angle to it. So we work with some companies who are trying to target the right users. And a lot of the stuff that rolled out the last 2 years was kind of impactful. This feels like it could be pretty impactful. This is going to, this, they didn't specifically call it out, but as I understood it, it's not necessarily attacking the Facebook pixel, which is effectively what Facebook uses to track you across the web. It's more so attacking the like buttons, but those are really, really closely tied. So yeah, I thought that was the same thing too. It's just interesting to me that in this kind of internet 3.0 or whatever we're calling it phase, there's a company that is the biggest company in the world, and one of the things that they're fighting for is privacy like this. It feels like one of those things that like if you ran a simulation a bunch of times, like it just wouldn't happen. So I feel in a way fortunate that there's someone out there who's paying attention to this kind of stuff. I could very easily see a alternate reality or like a dark future where there's no Apple, that this stuff is just running rampant and no one's keeping it in check.
Yeah, it's interesting. And there's a whole conversation there around why what seems like Apple's strategy for focusing on privacy, even outside of like Siri and all that stuff. It's that's interesting, but we are kind of running out of time here. So a couple other things I guess that were I thought were interesting is they did bring like 3 or 4 apps to the Mac. The home app, meaning that like now all the home stuff will work from your Mac, and I'm assuming Siri on your Mac will now work with that as well. Um, the news app, that's cool. Before, when you clicked a news link, it just redirected to the website, but it seems like now it'll actually open the news app on the Mac. That's pretty cool. And the stocks app as well, and one other one. It was voice memos, I think. And I guess what was probably like the big uh, reveal that we all kind of knew was coming was like Project Marzipan, and these 4 apps were Apple kind of just dog fooding their their work on that. So they built these 4 apps using the new APIs that they built for Project Marzipan, and I think this is really we were talking beforehand that about what this means for the Mac, and I know you had some thoughts on that.
Yeah, I had two kind of thoughts here. The first one is a little shorter, so I'll hit that one. Is it's just really great to see them dog fooding. I think there was an underlying tone of this whole keynote that was, "Hey guys, we are listening to you." I think you saw it at the very beginning with the performance. I think you saw it with the notifications and the do not disturb, and then I think you see it coming out in the Mac OS here of saying like, we understand that we need to slow down and we're doing it and we're focusing on quality and we're going to tell you about this thing that's coming a year out in the future because it may impact your businesses, and to make sure it's functional and where it needs to be to release it, we're going to put 4 apps out there, and kind of a pretty cautious but a way that we'll know if things are working. So I thought that was the main takeaway I got from that was, we're listening, we're slowing down. And then, yeah, the thing that you were kind of alluding to is that I found it really interesting, the positive take that people were putting on this marzipan. To me, they don't want to be spending this much time on the Mac. To me, it's reactionary based on the MacBook Pro issues, and from all indications, basically killing the Mac Pro and then bringing it back because of the community. It To me, this was okay, fine, we'll let you bring your iPhone and your iPad apps over to the Mac easily, because we know no one's writing apps for that at the moment, and we kind of want to focus on iOS anyway. That's the future, and this is a nice way to get some apps brought over to Mac OS easily, because no one's going to spend the time to write a fully custom native app for Mac otherwise. So I thought it was interesting, the positive take that everyone in the community had about this. To me, it was a little bit more of a, let's just get this out of the way so we can focus back on iOS.
Yeah, I see both sides. Like the one side is Apple is investing, and this is proof that they're investing because they're releasing these things. But also, what they're investing in seems like a long-term strategy of not having to invest as much in the future, right? If they build this out now, then there's so much reuse that can be done from their work on iOS, that they're gonna pour money into, because the iPhone's just like, it's just so incredibly popular. Um, so yeah, that it and I don't think that's necessarily bad. I mean, I use a Mac every day, um, but I wouldn't. I'm not opposed to like having a whole lot more apps on there because uh, of reused code, and I'm not opposed to Apple being able to like make UI kit really good, because they're doing things for iOS, and then the Mac users get a bunch of benefits from that. Um, I think there are some positives there, but I also think like what you're saying is true. It's not just purely positive. It's positives that are happening because Apple knows they can't invest the same in two platforms at the same time. So they either need to, what we kind of felt like they were doing for a couple of years there, just let one of them kind of fall away, or they need uh, to reuse as much of their investments as possible, and that's what they're doing now.
Yeah, I think it's a great strategic move. I don't want to sound too much like I was criticizing it. I think I kind of was hopefully calling it out for what it is, but it is also the right move. So I honestly think that the community gets a little bit of credit here. I do not think we would be in this situation if we hadn't had kind of thrown up our hands with a lot of the recent kind of missteps, I would say. Um, yeah, I think that they would have moved away from innovation on the Mac in a much faster way. So I think there's something to be said for them listening, and for people expressing their thoughts and trying to help. I think Apple's always been a company that's paid attention to what the users and what the advocates and the real enthusiasts say, and that's a huge strategic advantage. Just from having so many people thinking about things. As long as you kind of have your ears and your eyes open, and you can consider things that come across kind of in clear eyes, I think you can increase your strategic execution just by seeing all kinds of ideas that you maybe wouldn't have come up with on your own with 20 people in a conference room.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. I hadn't really thought about that much, but all of us sitting around thinking about this and talking about it actually is a benefit for Apple if they listen, if they have their ear to the ground to see and are kind of like weeding through all of the bad takes for the good ones, then they can maybe learn some things and apply those. And it seems like they've been doing that recently, so that's really good. So one last thing, I always end the show with the same question. What is one thing that you find unusual in tech right now?
Yeah, I was thinking about this. Man, there's so many, which I guess means that either too many things are usual or unusual. I think it's really strange to me if I step back and take a look at kind of the whole landscape. It's very strange to me, the concentration of power that we have in so few companies. I think it's something that take for granted is not the right expression, but I think it's something that we all just assume is normal. And I don't think that that's going to be true. Maybe if we look back in 10 years, I think it's going to fall on the shoulders of regulators to get smarter about how they classify monopolies and who these companies are allowed to acquire and who they aren't. But it is strange. It is strange to me how concentrated that power is. I don't think you see that in too many industries. And from a strategic point of view, which is kind of an angle that I think both of us look at the world from, it has really interesting implications for just how the other participants in the market react and the things that people are able to do, some good and some bad. So that's what I see. I think a good example of it right now is, these electric scooters are going crazy, and I think for good reason. I think it's really they just make a lot of sense. And it's kind of sad that Uber bought one and Lyft bought one, and it's like, okay, well, that's kind of that. Like, those two same companies are going to have scooters now. So moving on, what's the next thing? It's a little bit sad that you're kind of not going to see those companies fight it out and maybe have a new brand that has a different voice out in the world, or spin off just a new culture and potentially all kinds of new ideas. So that to me is something that stands out. That's good and bad. It remains to be seen which side of that line it ends up on at the end of the day.
Yeah, that's a good answer. And I like that example as well. So where can people find you on the internet, Ryan?
Oh yeah, sure. I guess the place we all exist and love and hate is Twitter, and I'm R Jonesy on there. Probably hard to spell, so maybe look for a link. And then the two apps that I'm working on, Weather Line 2 should be maybe the end of this summer, and then Flighty, and both of those handles are linked in my Twitter profile, so you can find them there. And that's probably it. Just a Twitter guy like everybody else. Okay, awesome. Yeah, and you guys can find me on Twitter as well at TimothyBuckSF, and you can find Unco on Twitter at _UncoFM. Thanks for coming on the show, Ryan. Thanks for having me. It was fun.
Yeah.